about research skills. Library research skills, all the resources available to you to help you with that research for your dissertation. So today's topics, what I'll cover, it's about research strategy, evaluating sources, library resources, and a bit about referencing as well towards the end. Okay, so when doing any academic research, it's important to do a bit of planning, have a bit of a strategy, analyse your research question to identify key terms that you can use when you come to searching across these search engines and databases, and think of alternative key terms and phrases that you might use as well to sort of maximise the efficiency of your searching. So you might want to for example, develop a mind map with different terms, keywords, broader or narrower terms, alternative terms, or just a simple list of terms as well. And this is something you can develop as you go along, find new keywords as you start to do a bit of initial reading, but worth keeping a record of what your searching is and what terms you've used. And in terms of some search techniques on the databases, so these occur across most search engines and interfaces. Using phrase searching can be very useful to make your searching more specific. So to find words side by side, for example, urban design, putting speech marks around that phrase will search for those two words together. And this is also really useful if you're looking for the name of an architect or the name of an architecture practice. For example, David Adjaye or Adjaye Associates will pinpoint those more exact results. And truncation is available on a lot of databases as well, which helps you to broaden your search by finding plurals and words with the same stem. So, for example, you can use the truncation symbol asterisk. Architect will find then architectural, architect and architects with that one search and using that truncation symbol. Another way, another technique of making your search more specific, use and between your search terms. So this will narrow then your search down. So for example, design, we've got 14 million results. This is on Library Search, the big search engine. And social impact, we're bringing those results down. Again, you can carry on adding these key terms to make the search more specific. Just have a play around with those keywords that you're using. So if you put and in between your search terms, that helps you in thinking about how you're structuring the search. If you don't put and in between your search terms, then the databases do default to put it in automatically. You can then go on to develop your search a bit further. If you've got alternative terms, you can put or in between those alternatives. So here, for example, we've got sustainability or eco or green as alternatives. If you do combine it with another search term such as design, you need to put those alternatives in a bracket, in brackets, so that the search logic is correct. So you're developing a search string. So you might try using or and alternatives. If you're just not getting enough results back, try some of those alternatives. And in the lower half of the screen here, another search tip is to always look to see if there's an advanced search on the database. So for example, in Library Search and a lot of our indexes, there is an advanced search where you can specify the field that you want to search in. So you might search across all fields, or you might choose something more specific like title field or abstract keywords. And it also allows you to construct that search string. So it will be doing the bracketing and such like for you. So you can also combine with and or not between your search strings as well. Okay, another search technique, always have a look at what limits and filters are available on a particular database. So it might be relevant to limit to peer-reviewed journals, which are the top quality academic journal articles. So assessed by other experts in the subject before they are published, so you can be guaranteed with the quality information there. So often there's a box you can tick to limit to scholarly and peer-reviewed. Do be careful with that, though. There might be some journals that might be really, really useful and aren't actually peer-reviewed, so just be careful with that one. Often you can limit by date, subject, and content type. For example, content, article or book or chapter. And as I mentioned on the previous screen, use the advanced search, often searching within abstract, which is a summary of the article or the book, can be a more specific search as well if you're getting just too many results. Okay, so if you want to do a quick activity now, if you want to use chat, what are some of the main differences between these two types of information? So books and ebooks versus journal articles. If you've got a few ideas about that, you can put it in the chat. Although I realise I can't see the chat, so Stephen, I might need your help to feedback. But yeah, a few differences between these two types of information, books and journal articles, in terms of, you know, the advantages, perhaps disadvantages of those types of information. A minute or two to put, I think, put some ideas in the chat. Yeah, so what is the information good for, specifically in books and ebooks, and what might journal articles be good for?
Getting some responses now. So first one's maybe journal articles contain the latest information.
Yeah, brilliant, exactly. Any advance on that?
Yeah, journal articles is from Katie Flower. Journal articles are geared more towards a particular field of research or study.
Yeah, a lot more specialist information sometimes in the journal articles, very focused information. Anything about the books there?
Not yet. So we've got some more about journal articles. From Mara, journal articles tend to be more specialist. From Sally Ho, potentially journal articles are more peer-reviewed. Books, not necessarily.
Yeah, probably a bit of both there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. Let's have a look then. So books and ebooks, yeah, very good for background information and context. Often theories, models, and can include very specific information. Again, for example, case studies. And as we said, journal articles, a lot more current. So journal articles or magazine articles often coming out monthly. So you might find information reaches the journal articles before it reaches the book. So very current, focused topics, again, provides examples, case studies, and in-depth research on particular topics. So books are perhaps a good starting point if you're just initially exploring a research area. So let's just have a think about evaluating sources. So you probably need to consider all sorts of different types of sources depending on your topic. It might range from observations and blogs, websites, to more academic and quality sources, for example, newspaper articles, books, and the journals that we've mentioned, whether those are peer-reviewed or industry journals. So if you're on an academic database, you can be kind of assured of the quality of those latter resources. Other sources to consider: have a look at your reading list. There's often a good starting point, and also bibliography. So often for an academic paper, a book or a journal article, there's a bibliography or a list of references that the author has used, which can again be a good pointer towards other sources, expanding that search out to related material. So make sure you record your sources, all your sources, as you find them, whether they're websites, articles, and books. So it will make your referencing easier. Also means you'll be able to track that article that you found down again. Sometimes it's easy to lose it. You know, if you haven't recorded your search, the way you've searched, or the actual article. So it's good practice just to record your references as you go along. So let's have a look at just a bit about evaluating a source, particularly relevant if you are looking at websites. Take a look at the following source, and in the chat box, if you can type whether it's a good source, a bad source, and the reason why. Now, I'm not sure if you can click on that link to get straight through to it.
No, I've just tried. It's...
Oh. Now, because I've not got chat, I can't actually put that into the chat.
I should have rehearsed this. Can you email it to me and I can stick it in the chat?
So, I don't think I can actually. Okay, let's not do that activity then. You can always go back to that after if you'd like to. Okay, so basically I'm going to just tell you about the methodology for evaluating a source. So I don't know if you've heard about the CRAP test, which is a way that you can sort of structure your thinking about evaluating a source. So what might those letters stand for? So, yeah, C for currency. So how timely is the information? Is it current or is it out of date? Is there even a date on the website? What is the relevance? Is it relevant to your research? Does it answer some questions? Does it fill some gaps? The authority, who is the author? So if it's a website particularly, is there an author, a named author? And does that author have expertise? Is that clear? The accuracy, is the information accurate and reliable? And the purpose, why was it produced? So whether there's any bias in the information being conveyed. So on that website that I was going to ask you to have a look at, it was actually an opinion piece with no information given on the expertise of the author. The link to Twitter didn't work. Was it accurate? Well, it was just...
Sorry, Elaine, someone's put it in the chat. So
oh, brilliant.
There is a clickable link now.
Right,
if
okay.
you want to have a quick peep.
Yeah, so thanks for that. Yeah, so it's an opinion, although it's well written and it's well constructed and it sounds good, it is an opinion piece. It's this person's opinion. So it's whether you agree or disagree, you probably need more information, and there are no references listed, so we don't know the sources that this author has used. And if you look at the purpose of the website, it's a UX collective. So it says what the purpose of the collective, curated stories, and their advice to their own writers on there is to find references, respect the work of other authors who have been writing about that topic for years, and link to them, give them credit to make the argument stronger. So it's the same advice for your academic writing, but in this instance, the author hasn't followed the advice of the publisher of that website. So not a reliable source, not something you should be using in your academic writing. Okay, so sticking to the academic sources, whereabouts do you start? Where do you search? Well, library search is the starting point for academic research. And so this is the search engine that searches across millions of articles, books and ebooks. So it's a vast search engine, so very comprehensive and covers all subject areas. And it's, you know, it has information that's behind the paywall that the university subscribes to these resources. So rather than using Google as a starting point, you know, if you come to library search, then you're guaranteed to get to access to all that academic quality information that sits behind paywalls. So I'm going to dip out to the library website now to just do a quick demo. Okay, so quickest way to get to the library website is just to Google MMU library, although you can navigate via the menus to get there. So let's just put a quite straightforward search in here. So as I said, it will be putting and in between those terms for us. We don't specifically need to do that. And make sure that you do sign in as Manchester Met students. That ensures that you'll see all the information that you've got access to, and also so that you can use the full functionality of library search. That includes being able to save your results, save your searches. So you know, we'll help you keep track of those references. So you can see here we've got 1,000 and odd results in the library there. The first few results happen to be books, and you can see your search terms are highlighted within the abstract or summary there. So if you click on the title, you'll be able to see the full list of contents. See all your terms highlighted, including subject terms, which you can link out to. And you might be, as I say, developing those keywords. You might pick up a few alternative keywords that you can use to increase your efficiency of your search. Now, this particular book is a print book. It's only available in print in the library because we haven't got the View ebook. So in this case, you will need to go and retrieve that book off the shelf at that shelf number 720.47094 with the letters GAU. So record that to find it on the shelves, and that's on the first floor, West Wing. It's a 2-week loan. If you take any book out, they get renewed automatically. You'll just be alerted if someone else reserves a book. You'll be sent an email asking you to return that book, so do keep an eye on your university emails. If the book was out on loan, then you would have an option to reserve it, and then the other student would get emailed to ask them to return the book. So you can just reserve if it was out on loan, but this one is available on the shelf. Second book on the list is only available as an ebook, so you can click on that link to get to the full text of the whole ebook, and then you'll find other resources on there, other books that are only available both e and print. So just have a look at the individual records. So I mentioned about keeping an eye out on the filters available. The filters are all available on the left-hand side here. So you could limit to a book, in which there are 93 books in total. If you are off campus, then you might want to just limit to ebook. But be careful that you don't exclude the print books as well. If you're trying to do a comprehensive search, you should be keeping an eye out for those print books that aren't necessarily available as ebooks. And for the art and architecture subjects, as ever, for some books, they are only available in print because they're often from smaller publishers. They're often very visual, so there's copyright issues with the images in terms of creating an ebook. So again, if you're in Manchester, it's worth coming to the library and browsing in the 720s on that first floor. Again, browsing in the books at the shelves is a good way of finding information too. So don't neglect those print books that are available. And we have a fantastic collection of architecture books in the library on the first floor, all together on the first floor west wing, although you'll find some urbanism books on the ground floor at the 307 numbers. Okay, so also down the limits on the left-hand side. So you can clear filters as well, or retain filters as you're searching there. Let's limit to article. Let me just take filters off first. Limit to article. So this is journal and magazine articles. So more specific. We've got 1,000 results there, so much higher number than for the books. And so the first item here does happen to be available online in full text. It's in the journal, the Architect's Journal, and you've got the volume and the issue or part number there, the date and the page number. So this one is only 1 page long, so that gives an indication of how detailed or how much information is there in that particular article. Again, you can click on the title. You'll sometimes get an abstract available at this point. Or you can click straight through to view full text to load that into the screen. You may sometimes land it on a specific database here and have to rerun the search, but sometimes it lands you directly at the article. So there's the article in pulling from one of our databases. Okay, so let's go back to the search results. And I mentioned being able to limit by peer-reviewed. If you are off campus again, you might want to limit to full text only. But again, we have a lot of print journals in the library, about 300 art and design journals. So again, you might want to come and browse those on the second floor, east wing. So you'll find all the architecture, design, landscape journals in one place there on the current shelves. Or if you are off campus, you can't get in, click on full text. And a lot of those print journals are indexed, so they will come up on the results. It's just that there will be an extra step to get that journal article. So you could limit to peer-reviewed, so that will limit changing from 1,000 results at the top so it's gone down to 700 results that are peer-reviewed. Okay, and depending on your search criteria, your topic, you might want to limit by date as well if it is contemporary material especially, or you can put a custom date range in that field there. I did mention another way of refining your search is to look for the advanced search on any database. So here at the top, you've got a link to the advanced search. And this is where you can specify the different fields. You might have an author field, title, keyword, abstract, and you can use the and or not operators. Not will exclude a phrase if you're getting a lot of, say, architecture computing information you don't want. You could exclude computing as a phrase, perhaps. So yeah, you can put those different terms in and have a play around to just refine that search a bit more, add more rows if you need to. Okay, back to our search screen. Let me just not signed in again here. So keep an eye on the top here to see if you're remaining signed in. Okay, I'm back signed in now again. Let's do another search. So I was going to just point out the, in terms of keeping track of your references, being able to save articles or books that you're interested in, the references. So you can click on the save icon along each of on the ones that you're interested in. So you can see here we've currently got 3 saved items. You need to action those. They disappear at the end of when you log off. So you need to action them if you want to keep them. So make sure you're signed in. Go to your saved items, and then you can, if you want to save them for your next session, you can create a list, and then they remain in that list under your ID for you. You could also email them to yourself. You can use the citation tool as well. So if you use this can help you with formatting your references, but there is a word of caution here as well. So here we can select a citation style, and I'm going to talk a bit more about referencing towards the end of the session. So you can select Harvard style. There isn't actually, we use MMU Harvard at the university. There isn't an MMU Harvard style to select from, but Harvard will be the closest to that. So it gives, it formats the reference for you. So your authors, the year, the title of the book in this case, and the publisher and the place of publication. Okay, but what you will need to do is just check that version against MMU Harvard, just to make sure they're not capitalizing certain areas of the reference where they shouldn't be. So it's just to be consistent, but I will move on to referencing towards the end. Okay, so that site can be quite useful. I didn't mention as well, you can also at this point choose to export to a references management software, for example, EndNote, RefWorks and RIS. So we support EndNote at the university. You might decide to use one of the other referencing softwares if you're familiar with it, but we provide specific workshops on EndNote, so you might want to do that. So you can basically paste those into EndNote, and it helps you with your creating your reference list and citing within your academic writing. Okay, so that's saving your references, and you also might, if you do a really good search that seems to have all the right terms and be really hitting the results, you might decide to save your search as well. So you can rerun that if you want to, keep up to date and check if there's any new articles published. Then it might be a good idea to save a search as well. Okay, so that's a quick overview of library search. I don't know if there's any questions at that point about library search specifically. But if not, we'll move on to having a look at more specialist resources.
That's all quiet in the chat, so you can maybe move on.
A good sign. Okay, so if you've done a good thorough search of the library search, then the next thing to do is probably to move on to the more specialist databases, which you will find on the library website. And a lot of these specialist databases, library search, the big search engine does not search across them, or it doesn't search across them very comprehensively. So you will need to go to some of the specialist databases. And the way that you can access these is to, from the main homepage of the website, select Browse by Subject, and then you can select a subject guide, whether that's architecture or landscape architecture, or if you're looking at sort of more sociology or history, there's a guide listing different databases across all of our subject areas. If there is a database you know the name of, obviously that you can use for the find a database list. There's an A to Z list on the website for you as well. Okay, so shall we try another activity? So we'll do a bit of a scavenger hunt. If you want to go and explore a subject guide, so via the library website, if you can find a database, you can find the subject guides first of all. So click on Browse by Subject and find a database on the architecture or landscape architecture subject guide. And bring it back into the chat, the title of the database and what sort of information does it contain. So quickest way to get to the library website is just to Google MMU library, if you don't want to put the web address in. Then find Browse by Subject. You might need to just scroll down the website page, find Browse by Subject, and then you'll get a list of our subject areas. So you can select architecture or landscape architecture. Once you get to the guide, scroll down the guide until you see a link to explore databases. Okay, so a couple of minutes to do this. Don't all bring back the first database on the list. If you can have a scroll through the list of databases that you hopefully find, to find the title of a database that might interest you, and put the title in the chat and a summary of what it contains, whether it's journal articles or books or some other type of information. And hopefully Stephen won't mind reading out some of the databases that come into chat.
Yeah, of course.
If you're having any problems finding that, the databases within the subject guides, just put that in the chat. I can dip out to demonstrate it if necessary. Okay, did you all find the subject guide?
Or people seem happy enough. I've had one return so far from Sally Ho, who's found the RIBA British Architectural Library catalogue online.
Brilliant. Yeah, that's a great resource, especially if you just want to find architecture, journal articles.
Got someone, Amanda's come back with Digimap, maps and geospatial data.
Right, yeah.
I've had a request from Sadia. Could you demonstrate it? Or at least
Yep.
Maybe getting from the library homepage into the databases.
Yep. Okay, so let's share the. Okay, so library search. Click back on the library here. Okay, so library website, a quick way. Search tools at the top, and you can click on subject guides, or scroll down a bit, and you've got Browse by Subject here. Okay, so you can choose the broad faculty area at the top. We've got Arts and Humanities, and so you've got one for architecture there, one for landscape architecture. Let's go to architecture. Pretty similar resources actually, whether you're looking at architecture or landscape architecture, because often the resources cover both. So architecture, yeah, you do have to scroll down a bit here to the databases section and explore databases. Okay, so you then should be able to see that full list. Very different resources. Did anyone else put anything else in the chat?
We've had one from one of the Architect's Journal, old favourite.
Yeah.
Digimap and the RIBA I've mentioned already.
Yeah. Okay, so hopefully we can all locate that now. You might want to bookmark it because you should be going back there frequently. And also don't Google these database titles, because you need to come in via the library system so that it triggers authentication. These are the databases that we subscribe to. They're behind a paywall. So if you Google them, it won't trigger that Manchester Met authentication system, which sees you as a student and then gives you full access. So come via either databases A to Z on the main library website, or come via the subject guide. So again, if you bookmark that link, that would be quite useful for you. Okay, I'm going to go back to the presentation. So thanks for those who brought some of those databases back. So some of the ones that you might have found on there, we mentioned the RIBA library catalogue. That's the catalogue of the holdings of the RIBA library in London, but they do index the architecture journals as well. So there's a full index of journal articles on there. So again, if you're getting overwhelmed on library search and you need to drill down to architecture, that can be another good point to look at. You've also got things like LinkedIn Learning on there for online tutorials on any bit of software you might need to use. Digimat was mentioned. Some of these I'll move on to in a bit more detail. But we've got journal indexes in there. We've got books, ebook services, and so lots of different types of information. So one of the databases you might come across is the Construction Information Source. So this is a brilliant database for all the technical information related to building. It's got lots of government information from associations. It's got over 500 publishers, and RIBA, all the RIBA published books you'll find within this database as well. The NBS building regulations are all available here as well. It's all in full text. You can browse by publisher or do specific searching. So really is an important one to have a look at. Building studies in there, as well as some of the technical design information. And then we had as well some journal listings on that database list, services such as Art and Architecture Source, which covers 700 full-text journals, including the Architectural Review. And the Avery Index, again, it's a listing of architecture journal articles. So about 900 architecture journals indexed. And it's an international listing, so we're not necessarily guaranteed to have every journal that's listed on there, and you'll need to, on Avery, use the Find It link to check if we've got an online or print subscription if you find an article in a journal that looks useful. Okay, so again, as I mentioned, if you've got too many results on library search, it might be useful to dip into these more specific databases, which aren't searching across millions of results. So here's a search on Art and Architecture Source. Again, you've got an advanced search at the top where you can use and or not and choose your fields to search in. And within the results, you'll see immediately those available in full text have PDF full text available. If they don't have the PDF full text, they might not have the images. You'd need to click on the Find It link, Find It MMU, to see if we've got a subscription, or if we've got the article in print on the shelves in the journals on the second floor. Okay, if you have trouble finding anything, if you come to a dead end and you're not sure, then you can just drop us an email and we'll look into it. Okay, another database. It was a database of ebooks from Bloomsbury, covering the theory of design, including architecture and interiors. It's got some design encyclopedias on there and biographies, so quite a useful source. Someone brought back the Architects Journal as a database, so an industry journal, not necessarily counted as a peer-reviewed journal, but very high quality information, great for news and building studies. And it includes the AJ Buildings Library, which was new last year, which has 2,000 building projects on, with all photographs, drawings, plans, elevations, sections of particular buildings. So that is a fantastic addition to our resources. Just to note, you must register for an account to Architects Journal using your Manchester Met University email address. So again, it's that triggering of our subscription and the authentication. So for any of these databases, if you read the information under a database title, it will tell you if there's any specifics about registration. Normally, you just get straight on with your Manchester Met ID and password, but there are some that you need to register for. And Digimap is another one that you will need to register for, or renew your registration if you've used it before. Okay, so Architects Journal, the Buildings Library screen. So you've got an advanced screen on here as well, so you can search very specifically. This search for Manchester, you can search for practice or architect's name, building name, and link to any of those 2,000 projects. And new this year is detail inspiration. So probably a lot of you are familiar with the journal detail. So this was the most heavily used journal in the library in recent years. So you'd find huge piles of detail scattered around the journal section. So this year, from just a couple of weeks ago, we've now got access to detail inspiration, which includes 4,000 building projects. So it's fully searchable. You can either use the keyword search box there, or click on more options underneath that search box to find the limits that are available. And you can see the quality of the information that you're getting. So it's literally what was in the detailed journal is available digitally. So you can open a particular document. So this is the journal as it would have appeared. The left-hand side has the page numbers. So you can click on particular pages to get all the project details and the images there. And then you can download that as well. Another industry journal worth pointing out is Building Design. So this is an online journal. Again, it has lots of building studies on there, as well as news, jobs, lots of other useful information, fully searchable. A mention about Bob, the Boxer broadcast service. So this is available in the UK. It's a streaming service for TV and radio of the terrestrial television channels, BBC Channel 4 and channels like that. And again, it's a great source of documentaries on architecture and other topics. So again, can be a good source of information for research. And if you're outside the UK, then we have available internationally Canopy for streaming films and documentaries. This is available via the database's A to Z listing. So a number of architecture videos available to watch on there, not available via, for example, YouTube or other such sources. And another resource that went live last week, another new resource, is Pigeon Digital database of architects' talk. So really exciting to have this new service as well. So again, unique information on here, hearing from the architects and presentations, sort of in-depth, excellent sources for research again. Okay, finally, of the resources, just wanted to signpost Google Scholar as well, which is listed as one of the databases. You can just Google Google Scholar as well. So the academic end of Google can be quite a useful place to search as well. So it's scholarly literature, articles, abstracts, and books. It searches across university repositories, as well as publishers. There's a lot of free full text articles on there. Those that are behind paywalls, you'll see a find it link that you can click on to check whether we've got a subscription to the paid articles. On the architecture subject guide or any of the subject guides, you'll find further help. For example, there's help guides on maps, newspapers. We have newspapers, historic newspapers, contemporary newspaper services, again, could be a good source depending on what you're looking for. There's databases that cover theses, so again, that could be something worth looking at, and information about literature review as well. Okay, so I've just got a few slides on referencing. I don't know if there's any questions about searching that have come into the chat in the meantime. If I just move on to a bit about referencing.
Yeah, it's all quiet in the chat.
Okay. Okay, so referencing, very important. Why do you need to reference? To acknowledge the research contributions of others and avoid plagiarism. Citing well-researched material provides evidence for your own statements. And so it allows others to locate the information that you've used and read. So person marking your work or assessing your work can trace back to that original material that you've used. Demonstrates you've read around your topic, and the citations separate your ideas from those of others, again to avoid that any plagiarism, and it is standard academic practice. So citation is an in-text indicator of the source of the information. So here, for example, Shields and the date that the book or the article was published, 2014, in brackets. And the bibliography is the full details of the sources that you've cited in your work, i.e. your reference list and sources that you have read to inform your ideas but have not cited in your work in alphabetical order. So this is the list of references or the bibliography at the end of your assignment or dissertation. So how do you cite if it's a direct quote? So if you're putting a quote in, you need to make sure you've got the author, the date, and at the end there, 4, 5, 6 is the page number. So again, it's the idea of tracing that quote back to the specific page of the source that you have used. And if it's an online resource that you're quoting from, you won't have a page number, so you will simply put online. So here we've got BBC as the author, 2016, and online as the date. And there's different ways of citing. So you can either use the citation at the end of the statement. So here you've got your statement, and then in brackets the end, you've got the author and date. Or you can use the author's name in your writing. So here, Cottrell, and then bracket the year suggests that. So that's embedding it within the actual sentence rather than putting it at the end. So here's an example of a reference list, different sources listed on here. So the top reference there, we've got the author, the date, the title. This is a journal, so you've got the title of the article, Fighting for the Global Catwalk, followed by the title of the journal, International Journal of Urban and Regional Research, the right, and the volume, issue, and the dates of the, not the dates, the pages of the article. Secondly, you've got an online image. Obviously, anything online, you're going to need to put the website in, and also not only that, the date accessed. Okay, so we've got a range of books, articles, and websites on that reference list, so a good range of resources. Okay, so how to reference. So for a book or ebook or exhibition catalogue, then the standard MMU Harvard formatting is detailed there: author, surname, year of publication, title of book in italics, edition if applicable, place of publication and publisher. So you've got some examples there of how that is set out. The final one there is has editors rather than authors, so you need EDS to indicate that after the author's name, Milton and Rogers. Okay, so a journal or a magazine article, again, follow the MMU Harvard formatting style. So this time you've got author's surname, title of journal article, title of journal in italics. So the source is always in italics, the primary source, volume number, issue number, and first and last page numbers of whole journal article. Sorry, this box is getting in the way. I'm presuming you can see that. Okay, so yeah, at the bottom there you've got the journal reference, web page with no author. So again, how you lay that out. So there's a guide, a referencing guide that details how you format all of these different types of sources. And your bibliography at the end, so rules about creating the bibliography: be consistent. So again, if you follow the MMU Harvard formatting style, that ensures you've got consistency. Each source appears only once. List each source mentioned or referenced in the assignment, or if you're doing a bibliography, also that you have read around as well and informed your ideas. Arrange the bibliography alphabetical by author or organisation name. If there are multiple sources by the same author, you can arrange these by year with the oldest first. And if you're unsure how to format something, look it up in the full referencing guide. If you don't find an exact match, adapt one of the examples in the guide to fit the source. Okay, so to find the referencing guide on the library website, there's a tab to link through to learn about referencing. And if you click through to that, you'll find the MMU Harvard guide, which contains an A to Z reference types list. So you can then look up how to reference a book, a website, even a TED talk, a video, an image. So that will give you the formatting. And there's lots of video guides as well at that point, an online tutorial to explain how to cite and reference correctly. So I did, when I was doing the demo, mention that there is also references management software that you can use, which will help you to create and manage your references and bibliography for your dissertation. And as mentioned, Manchester Met, we support EndNote. So there's lots of guides, videos and workshops available on the library website. So if you want to explore that, have a look at the guides available. It might be just worth working through a few of the videos and then perhaps booking on a workshop if you want some more help with that. And as I said, EndNote isn't the only referencing management software available. There are other software that does that as well that you might want to explore. Okay, if you need any help, then our workshops are listed on the library website under Study Smart, and you'll find a range of workshops on finding information, referencing, EndNote, and lots more as well. So there's the EndNote online workshops, for example. So yeah, do book onto a workshop if you want to have a look in more detail at any of these things. So just to recap from the session, so back to the start, search strategy, think around your topic, note down keywords, think about alternative terms, add further terms and themes as you find them, decide on the sources that you need and use the right search engines. Look for good quality academic sources and note down their details as you use them so that you can locate them again and format your referencing for your bibliography. Okay, and if you still can't find what you need, you can contact us via library chat on the website or email us. And if you do need, so if anything, any of the online resources aren't quite working correctly, just drop us an email, do let us know so that we can investigate. Or if you're not sure of what resource to use, you can contact me via the library@mmu.ac.uk email as well, and I can provide help via email or video appointment. And just before ending as well, these are obviously all the resources that Manchester Met Library subscribes to. Don't forget Manchester University there will be a lot of overlap in the resources, but there will be unique resources in both institutions. So if you're not finding something on the Manchester Met systems, you might want to also have a look at Manchester University Library as well and include that as part of your searching. Okay, so that was it for now. If you've got any questions, please do put them in the chat.
Thanks very much, Elaine. That's fantastic. I'm just going to have a bit of a filler while people think of questions. I think a couple of things that I would add to that. I think some of the databases that Elaine was showing, and certainly the RIBA catalogue, it has a filter that allows you to search by language. I'm very conscious that as a cohort, you're extremely international, and your dissertation topics might also be reaching across a wide range of geographical areas. So some of the source material that you might be trying to get hold of will be available in different languages. Obviously, within the cohort, many languages spoken. So it's not just clearly you don't just need to focus on material that's written in English. If you're working with material in other languages that you understand, that finds its way into your dissertation, then you can translate that. But at this stage, would really encourage you to keep your databases, your database searching really open, and pull back as much material as you can find. There's a question coming from Julian. Does a Manchester University website operate similarly to the MMU library search website? Yes, in principle. I think every library catalogue is slightly different, but I think as soon as you find your way around the MMU library catalogue or other databases that Elaine's been demonstrating, you'll get a handle on, or you become used to the kinds of processes that catalogue searches go through, and maybe in a slightly different format. You can do the same kind of searches not only on the University of Manchester library website, but other library and databases that you visit. So once you understand the principles of searching and the kind of detail that Elaine's demonstrated in terms of drilling down, you can usually apply that to any catalogue that you visit.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, yeah, there's some of those search principles about looking to see if there's an advanced search, what the filters are. They will look different, but essentially they are doing the same thing, and the rules about truncation and search techniques are sort of universal. Yeah, and also Manchester University does also have its own separate subject guides. So you could, again, find the subject guide for architecture on the Manchester University library website, where the Manchester Met is more likely to have architecture specific sources like the AJ and Detail. Manchester University perhaps has some of the wider academic databases might have slightly more coverage, like the JSTOR titles. Yeah, so but have a look at both, and again, you know, using those search principles, then you should be able to navigate. And there was a question about Architects Journal. Wasn't there earlier about is the AJ subscription free for architecture students? Yes, it is. If you were an individual, you'd have to go and pay. But if you come in via the library website and click on the link for the AJ, you'll be able to register as a student, get free access. So all the databases listed on the website are free to access. We pay for the subscriptions to those services.
Right, there's no more questions coming in, so I'll take that as a sign of full clarity, or at least for now, full clarity. Maybe last thing, just before we let Elaine go, is, you know, every year we get loads of architecture students who do sign up for the MMU study skills sessions through the libraries, and find them really useful. So, you know, they're free, they're run multiple times. The workshops themselves, their online training guides, super useful. Again, I also encourage you to take up Elaine's offer to, you know, if you're having difficulty finding something specific, or you just want some help or guidance about how to approach a search, then get in touch with the library. You know, they're information experts and can really take some of the difficulties out of finding information. Just the last question: can we download EndNote for free as students?
Yes, you can. There's a web version and a download version. So you might not need to download it, but yes, you can. It is free. So again, if you look at the help guides, it will tell you how to do that. Thanks.
Okay, I've got a couple of other slides about reference management software coming up after the break, so we can pick that up if anyone has any more questions. Okay, thank you very much, Elaine. I'll give you a quick ripple.
Thank you. Good luck, everyone.
Yeah, reference management questions just coming in. I'll pick those up after the break. We'll have a little section on that. Okay, what I suggest after we wave goodbye to Elaine is that we have 10 minutes, go and get a coffee, have some fresh air, the fag, whatever you want to do. It's now 11:11, so if we come back at 11:20, and we'll start the next exciting section of today's lecture. So Elaine, many thanks, much appreciated as ever. And everyone else, I'll see you at 11:20.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Cheers. Okay, are we good to go? Can't see anybody, so I'm just sort of speaking into the void at the moment. It's time 11:20. Let's get started. Find the slides. Okay, you see those all right? Oh, I'm trying to find the chat as well. Okay. Right, I should have introduced myself at the start. I'm Stephen Walker, Head of Architecture at University of Manchester. So I'll have met some of you in the induction sessions, but not necessarily all of you. So hello. I'm going to be talking for the rest of the morning about, well, more generally about literature reviewing. And I'll be talking to you again next week about methodologies, and these connect together, but also link back to some of the issues that Leandro will have talked to you about in the previous lecture to do with research design. In many ways, what I'm talking about, it complements the presentation that Elaine has just given. Elaine was talking in detail about some of the mechanics of finding stuff. I'm going to zoom out and talk about why you need to find it in the first place, how that forms a really important part of your dissertation work. Also, it forms a really important part of studio work, finding the right information, analysing it, and presenting it back in some format. So all of the context for these lectures as a dissertation, clearly it spills over into other areas of your life. So I've got half an eye on the chat. I've got half an eye on the waiting room as people are popping back in, and I'll try and concentrate also on my slides. So multitasking. This is what I'm going to be talking about. First is to try and contextualize the literature review and explain how it fits in your dissertation, as a document, as a piece of work, but also as a process. I'll talk a little bit about finding stuff. I'll do a very patronizing section on reading and writing. Maybe we'll have another break if you're feeling like you need some oxygen. And then I will work through some examples. There's some quite practical ways of developing literature reviews. And then finish with a very short section about tips and tricks. Obviously, at any point, if you've got any questions, either shout out or stick something in the chat. This is meant to be useful. So if you don't understand something, let me know and I'll try and clarify it. So that's the plan. I also should say that there's a bit of overlap between the presentation that Elaine has just given and what I will go through now. So I'll try and skip over those pieces. Also, there's deliberately too much information in the slide, so I'll be quite selective in terms of what I make reference to. And the idea is that we're talking, I guess, for all of these lectures, talking quite generally about how to begin your dissertations and try to provide you with some broad orientation and framework that helps you to get going. Our ambition is by the end of this academic year, and we've got best part of 200 very different dissertations that come back. And so for all of you watching this individually, I guess the challenge is to try and translate what I'm talking about in general terms into something that seems to fit with your own interests. As your dissertation ideas emerge, you begin to get a feel for what it might be that you want to study and how you study it. So try and translate these generic lectures into something that's useful for you, or that starts to feel useful. So for that reason, there's too much information on the slides. We'll put them on Moodle, and as you begin to start work properly in your own dissertation projects, then you can go back to the slides and pick up more detail from them in sections that you think are relevant for your own approach. So I will speed through some of these rather than trying to go through everything. So just to kind of recap some of the broad approach to dissertation, or any sort of research project that Leandro will have introduced last week when he was talking about research design. So for all of you, in some way, you'll have some kind of research question or questions, some kind of research hypothesis that helps you get your own dissertation topic going. What are you trying to find out? For all of you, in very different ways, that question will fit into some kind of research context or some kind of academic or architectural context, which is really where I'm focusing today. But it links back to the question, and it also links forward to how you actually explore that question, which is the topic for next week's lecture. I can tell you can barely wait for that. So next week we'll be talking about research methodology, but these three things fit together. They don't happen in a linear order. You'll be thinking about your research questions and refining them while you're doing some kind of literature reviewing, while you're trying to develop or refine a methodology. And when you make decisions about one, it will affect the other two. So these three things will circle around constantly for the next few months. They will eventually settle down, but that's probably by February or March next year. It's fine for them to be fluid for the foreseeable future. So I'm going to I want to zoom out and talk about the principles and some of the practicalities of doing a literature review, which is really how you establish the context for your dissertation. So to start from the back, really, a literature review traditionally can be a formal section or a chapter in a dissertation. So you might have a chapter that's called the literature review. The same in PhD dissertations, PhD theses. I'll show you some examples. So that there might be a section of your work that you submit that is identifiable as a literature review. It's got a title, literature review, and that's where you gather some of this work up. But before you get to that point, it's much more important that for all of you, you think about literature reviewing as a process. It's something that you all need to go through somehow, no matter how different your dissertation topics actually are. And it's that kind of activity that I want to explore in a bit more detail today. So when we're talking about literature review, literature as a word has certain kind of connotations. It sounds quite academic. At this stage, I'd encourage you to approach that quite broadly and think of literature as stuff. It's the stuff that you're exploring, you're searching for in order to get your dissertation started. So Elaine's been talking about books and journals and articles. She also mentioned documentaries and films, building studies, but it could be a whole range of other things. It could be talking to people, it could be visiting archives, it could be artifacts, buildings, TV programs. All of this stuff counts as literature in the broad sense. When we're thinking about the context for your dissertation, all of this might be relevant for you. Some of these things might be more relevant than others. So you have to navigate quite a wide range of stuff and begin to identify things that make sense for your topic and for your context. So when I'm talking about literature, it's this big bag of potential stuff that we're trying to understand. So also to split literature reviewing into two different sections, or two ways of thinking about it, both of which relate to the presentation that Elaine's just given. In the early stages, you'd be using these library catalogues and other databases to just gather up material that you think might be relevant for your dissertation topic. It might help you directly, might help you understand a bit more about the background to your topic. I'd really encourage all of you to be greedy in the early phases of writing your dissertation. Gather up loads of stuff and then begin to work through it, prioritize certain things, reject other things, leave other bits in the background. Some of the material that you gather through library catalogue searching will help you later on in the process. Some stuff that you find through library catalogue searching, database searching, will help you actually prepare your literature review. So there's two different ways of thinking about, two different ways of using your literature as you're finding it. So as I say, some goes into later chapters where you might be using it as sort of data or information. When we're talking about literature review, in terms of the context for your work, this is really about helping you to understand who else has studied either the same topic or the same kinds of issues. Who can you learn from? Who do you need to look at to help position yourself as a researcher and help position your dissertation in amongst other academic studies? So very much about understanding the options that you might have in these early stages for designing the dissertation that you want to write. And there might be some things that you use twice. Some material that's really useful for helping you to position yourself, and then that comes back later on because the material it presents or the way it presents that material or the information it contains is really important for how you develop your own analysis. So literature appears everywhere in your dissertations, but today it's really this contextual approach and how you develop a sort of framework through which to work that's my main focus. Again, why do you need to do it? Well, firstly, it gives you support when you're developing your dissertations in the early stages. Again, really important early on that you can use the literature review process to convince yourself that the broad topic that you're proposing for your dissertation is viable. You can convince yourself that there's enough information out there in language or languages that you can understand that will allow you to complete this large assignment. So it just gives you the reassurance that there is enough material for you to work with. Or conversely, if you're working in a very popular area, might be that you need to do a literature review to really focus down the approach that you're taking so that you can make sure it's a manageable project. Also, there'll be some of that process that you pass on to to the people that read your dissertation, that gives them some kind of background, to help them to understand where your particular study is situated. It might be giving them information about kind of approaches that you're taking. It might help them might reassure them, and particularly the people that are assessing your dissertation, might just reassure them that you are aware of the kind of key debates or key approaches that are relevant for your chosen dissertation topic. So it's a chance for you to reassure yourself and other people that you're familiar with the kind of key work in your area. So this is what we mean by situating your own dissertation ideas back into some sort of research context or architectural or practice context. And it's also useful because for some topics, it helps you to provide a benchmark against which you can evaluate the specific information that you find. Okay, I won't go through all of this. It's something that maybe flick back on or flick back to. Most important, I think, out of this list is that doing a good literature review early on, it can identify where your dissertation can succeed, or to say the same thing in reverse, helps you to avoid fruitless searches. It might be that you've got what you think is a great idea for dissertation, but an initial literature review can demonstrate to you that there's something about either the question or the way that you're proposing to take it forward that's simply not viable. In which case you would need to revisit the question and either change it radically or refine it slightly, and then try again to make sure that the literature that supports that approach is there for you. Establishing a context, we've talked about already. Also, literature review is a chance for you to develop or identify, develop and share any kind of specialist terminology that comes with your chosen topic. Again, that might be terms that you're already familiar with as you find your way into what's possibly a new subject area. There might be technical language that's associated with that, or technical vocabulary that's associated with that area. And doing literature review just allows you to understand a bit more about the terminology that you will encounter doing a detailed study in that area. Again, that's something that you can pass on to your readers. And then lastly, it just allows you to place your own research, your dissertation into a longer line of other research that's been done on that topic. Okay, literature reviewing, sort of moving from the catalogue searches that Elaine was demonstrating into the process of evaluating literature for your own dissertation. Literature reviewing, it's not just establishing a list, it's then analysing and assessing the kind of material that you're pulling back from those catalogue searches. So you're trying to evaluate whether these things are useful for you. If you think they're useful, why? How do they help you? So Elaine mentioned the CRAP test. That's one way of evaluating material, but there are others that I'll talk about in a bit more detail on the way through this morning. Literature reviewing, again, this will soon require you to exercise some kind of control over the material that you're finding. You don't need to, you're not expected to review everything evenly. You'll find some material that is a real priority for you because of the nature of your dissertation topic or the questions that you're asking. Other things are just simply there in the background that you think are useful to mention either historically or just to set the scene. So use your judgment, identify things and spend time pursuing things, reading them in detail that are central to what you're doing. Reject things that you thought might be useful, but on further investigation prove not to be so good. Gather together things that are just there in the background to help set the scene, but begin to exercise this kind of control over the material that you're finding. So you're trying to find content and significance as you begin to do the literature review. And again, I'll talk a bit more about how you can progress that practically in one of the later sections this morning. But to say the same sort of thing in a slightly different way, before you get too far, you need to know what's there, what's available to support your work on dissertation before you're too committed to that particular topic. Okay, I won't go through these in detail, but same sorts of things. The literature review, as you present it back at the end of the process, It shows that you're aware of how your work's situated in a larger body of literature, and it shows that you're able to make value judgments about what's really important for your particular work. Okay, so far so good. No questions in the chat, so I'll take that as a yes. Okay, finding stuff. Again, we'll repeat some of the things that Elaine's just mentioned. From day one, keep good records. You don't know today what will be central to your dissertation, what will be peripheral, and what you'll look at and then reject. So whenever you're looking at anything from this point forward, just keep a good record of it. You don't know if you will go back to it and use it somehow. Get into the habit of keeping a good record, good bibliographical record of everything that you're looking at. So the way to start will be to develop some sort of keywords, maybe some mind mapping, and I'll go through those in more detail. And then you can use the library catalogues and databases to begin to gather up the kind of material that might be relevant to you. Again, part of the dissertation process, and one of the assessment criteria involves literature reviewing, or involves the way that you establish and evaluate the context for your own work. So to put that on a diagram, this is by the National Organisation for Librarians, and in some way you'll all go through this process. You're trying initially to understand what you don't know, and how you might go about finding information that fills that information need, through ways of locating, accessing that information, which we'll talk about this week and a bit about next week, through to synthesizing or kind of gathering together and evaluating the material that you have. So this is usually referred to broadly as information literacy, and as part of the process of doing your dissertations, and your information literacy will increase. So you go through from wherever you are on this bottom bar, whether you're a kind of novice or advanced beginner, we'll expect you to move, not necessarily through to expert, but certainly through to towards the right of that diagram, and you'll be able to demonstrate that in the way that you're presenting the results of your literature review in the final document. Again, for different topics, different questions, you'll be pulling in a range of different kinds of literature. So for some of you, you might be needing to gather quite a broad synthesis. Others, you're looking more specifically at journal articles. For other topics, again, it might be that you're working more with books. For other people, it might be that you're looking more at conference papers and so on. So there's not a right way of doing literature review. There's not a right kind of literature to be reviewing. The most important thing is to refer it back to your own research question or your hypothesis, and just make sure that the sort of stuff that you're getting responds clearly to the kind of question that you're asking. Again, kind of repeats what Elaine was introducing at the start. You're trying to find keywords that describe your research questions or your topic or your problems, and by a process of trial and error, you're using those keywords in search engines, catalogues, to try and pull back the right amount of information. And as you get through this list, ways of understanding and linking together or connecting the material that you've got, and I'll show you some practical techniques for doing that in one of the later sections this morning. And that then leads you to ways in which you can structure the literature review that's appropriate for your dissertation. So I said right at the start, in many dissertations there is a chapter that's called literature review. And for some dissertations, that's not appropriate. Other ways of introducing reviewed literature into the work that you present. So I'll mention that on the way through. Again, these are a couple of slides for you to return to once you get going. Helps you think about what you're finding in a range of different ways. So depending on the dissertation topic that you've got, you can begin to think about, what kind of literature review is appropriate for your subject. Is it focused? Is it goal-oriented? Is it trying to provide an extensive coverage of material before you get going? Range of different ways of doing it. Again, there's no one right way, but if you flick back to this slide, once your own literature review is up and running, it'll begin to make more sense, and you can again use vocabulary to help describe what it is that you're doing. Similarly, this is another way of trying to understand how your literature review might be working. This is something that I'm shamelessly stealing from Angela Connolly, who developed this sort of matrix to help some of her students, once they were kind of inside the literature review process, to provide a kind of framework that they could use to interrogate the material that they were finding. So 3 W's. In this case, her dissertation students looking at resilience, debates around resilience and climate change. But she was suggesting that within that you could look at who, what, when, where, and why. So against these questions, and begin to locate the different literatures that they were finding in these questions, and them allowed the students to understand the connections between the literatures, but also the gaps. Again, the gaps within the matrix. So if it was difficult to find information in any one of these categories, it just made the students aware of that kind of gap. And I'll talk a bit more about gaps presently. So this was very specific to a particular dissertation topic or a particular dissertation theme, but you could write your own. So there's nothing to stop you producing your own version of this kind of matrix, just to help you evaluate and organise what it is that you're looking for, and also how you're beginning to put that together. Again, some sort of questions that you could ask yourselves. Not all of these will apply equally to all topics, so choose the ones that seem to resonate with your dissertation ideas as they grow and develop. So sometimes the context might really relate to where or when geographically or historically you're studying. It might be that you're looking at work of a particular architect or a particular group, and that will help you to focus on a material that just sets the scene around that period of history, that geographical or cultural area, that particular architect or a particular practice, and so on. So you're trying to find material that's worked in the same sort of academic territory, and you just gather that together, and that can help you to get going. It can help you to develop your questions. Might be that part of the work that you do in your own literature review helps to establish more of a theoretical framework through which you want to work within the dissertation. So again, you might be looking less at architectural practices or histories or geographies. It might be that you're looking at more specifically at ways of writing or at theories that other people have used to analyse and understand architecture. So again, you could take a theoretical framework as your starting point. Effectively, it might be that you're asking a theoretical question, and that will lead you to a kind of literature review that's much more theory-based. Again, for some of you, it might be that the nature of your question leads you to a key text that kind of dominates study of a particular person or a particular place or theme. It might be there's a small number of key texts that are still dominant in that area. Again, you don't have to agree with them, but you need to be able to identify and at least be aware of the approach and the content of material in those key texts, and then how you position yourself with respect to those key texts, something for you to develop during the course of the dissertation. You mentioned gaps a few minutes ago. One of the things that might emerge through reviewing literature is an awareness of not only what's there to help you, but where there might be things missing from the literature. And a gap can be a useful place for you to situate yourself. There's no requirement academically for your dissertation to be a completely original piece of work. But if you do find something that you think is missing in existing literature related to your subject, then you can draw attention to that and you can deliberately work into that. You can find things that help fill that kind of gap, increase our knowledge of that particular area of architecture or landscape or urbanism. If the gap is huge, then that might be the moment when you begin to question your questions. Is the starting point that you set up for your dissertation actually leading you into a study that's going to be really difficult for you to carry out, because it's proving almost impossible to develop a kind of framework within which to work. It's proving almost impossible to identify kinds of information that you can include later in terms of your analysis or in terms of people that you want to go on and talk to. So a good gap is okay. A colossal gap is problematic. Once we get you working in groups with your dissertation tutors, this is the kind of discussion that you can have with them if you have specific concerns about a gap that's relevant for your topic. Again, as I said a minute ago, it's fine for you to disagree with the key texts in your area. It's fine for you to start a literature review by criticising existing literature that's relating to your area. So, even if you disagree with something, or sometimes disagreeing with existing literature can actually help generate a really interesting and rich dissertation study. So you don't, when you're identifying literature and when you're skimming through it, you don't have to like it, and you just have to be convinced that it's relevant. How you move away from it is the sort of next step. So taking issue with existing literature can help to really provide a focus and a direction for your study. And some dissertations approach literature reviewing almost as the entire dissertation. And this will be a dissertation that's sometimes called a critical survey, or it's a sort of state-of-the-art report on approaches to a particular architect, a particular theme, a particular issue, location, technology, and so on. So it might be that actually doing literature review expands to fill almost all of your time. And again, thinking about your dissertation from the other end as a document that you submit for assessment. It might be that actually a lot of the process that you've carried out is all literature reviewing. And so for most of you, this won't be the case, but for some, if you find that your literature review is expanding to fill almost all of the dissertation time and content, that's not necessarily problematic. Again, check with your dissertation tutor once you get into groups. So far, so good. Any questions? I'm keeping an eye on the chat. Well, I've got no idea if anyone's still here. But assuming that you are, and assuming that no one's dropping a question in, I'll keep going. Okay, this is quite patronising. When we get the groups lists, okay, I'll come back to that. Maybe we have a we'll have a break after this section, but also we'll have a chat about how we go about putting you into dissertation groups. So hold that question, I'll come back to it, no hurry. All right, this is potentially quite patronising, but I'm going to go through it anyway, so shoot me. It's offered in the best possible way. So, as I mentioned earlier, one of the aims of the literature review is to increase your skills and information literacy. And this is useful not just for dissertation, but it will help you in studio as well, help you in many other activities that you carry out in practice. Within the literature review, we suggest that there be possibly four different kinds of reading that you'll need to carry out. And again, you might be doing this intuitively anyway, but it's useful to have these kind of terms because it helps you understand what you're doing, helps you understand once you've begun to gather journal articles, books, whatever it is that's coming back from your catalogue searches. Once you start reading, helps you understand how you're reading those. And that could help you understand what that literature might help with within your dissertation. So 4 kinds of reading: receptive reading, reflective, skimming, and scanning. I'll go through these in a little bit of detail. They're all useful. So skimming and scanning, very quick ways of working through a text. That's useful. It's as useful because it helps you make quick decisions about whether something's worth reading or not. It might help you to go through a long text and identify one page or one chapter that's relevant for your dissertation. Everything else you can leave behind. So skimming and scanning, these kind of quick activities, are just as useful for you as receptive and reflective reading, which you might think of as slower and more careful forms of reading. All of these are useful. All of these, again, you'll do at some point. So if you know what you're doing, if you can recognize how you're reading, or to turn that around, if you can force yourself to become a scanning reader or a skimming reader at certain moments, and that might speed up the process of reviewing literature. For others, it might be important that you move from being a scanner into a reflective reader. So think about how you're reading, and that will hopefully provide more of a structure when you're actually looking at stuff. Again, doing the literature review as part of the dissertation hopefully moves you from being a passive reader to an active reader, being a more sophisticated reader. And that will make you a better writer. I'll come back to that as we move through. Elaine emphasised several times when you're doing catalogue searches, it's really important that you go in, you're logged into your MMU account, or if you're using the University of Manchester Library catalogue, you're logged into your UM account, because that does open up access to academic databases. Inevitably, you'll also be Googling things. So just be aware that using Google isn't the same as doing catalogue searches. Not to say that it's not useful. It's another way of finding material. In all these exercises, most important thing is that you are evaluating how something helps you, whether it's relevant, whether it's peripheral, whether it's central, whether you just need to bin it. So yeah, we'd expect you to be doing catalogue searches or database searches, because that gives you immediate access to what you might think of as better quality academic material. But inevitably, you'll be doing a bit of cheeky Googling as well. I'd say be careful with anything that these kinds of researches come back with, and not just from Google. So thinking about how you're reading stuff as you begin to gather it, the idea that texts are sort of neutral, transparent, and entirely truthful is something that we'd really discourage you from believing, if that's something that you do believe. Because the argument is that instead, every time you read a text, you're constructing meaning based on your own background, your education up to this point in time. Also, you're thinking about it in the context of your dissertation will put a certain filter on how you read that text. So every time you read something, you're constructing meaning. It's not simply that the meaning of a text is deposited in the article and it's your job to retrieve it. How you find material, how you interpret it, is based on this kind of more active reading, active rereading. So texts that you identify as being particularly important, we'd expect you to return to and begin to position and interrogate in much more detail. So 4 stages of reading, 4 stages of searching that you might go through. That's certainly in the early stages, as you're starting to put some of these unfiltered keywords into library catalogues and other databases. As Elaine was demonstrating, you can quite quickly do searches that come back with 1 million or 10,000 or 1,000 suggestions. That can feel quite overwhelming, even if you narrow it down to 10 returns and you begin to read through those 10 pieces of literature. You can quite quickly feel that either everything that you read is true in these 10 different sources. They might disagree with each other. So you might be faced with trying to make sense of a topic that seems to have a wide variety of different opinions attached to it. That can make you feel overwhelmed, and that's something that we all go through as researchers. I'm not saying it's comfortable or that it gets any more comfortable the longer that you do it, but just recognize early on in your dissertations, to some extent, you'd all feel like you're kind of drowning in the information that you're finding. There's no easy way to bypass this. You just got to stick with it in the knowledge that you'll begin to make sense of the information that you're finding. If you use your research question or your research hypothesis, you remember what it was that generated this literature review to start with. What are you trying to find out? You can use that question as a lens through which to interrogate the specific texts that you're looking at. And that can help guide you to the bits that are important. Again, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, it allows you to interrogate the texts and find the bits that fit with your dissertation question. Coming back to the sort of skimming reader or the scanning reader, if you're trying to work your way through a large number of texts that you've just got back from a catalogue search, if you know what you're looking for, it allows you to go to the abstract of an article, where it could take you to the index of a book or the table of contents, and quite quickly identify which page, which section, which chapter is relevant for you. So you don't have to read the whole thing, but you can quite quickly search through that, identify passages or chapters that are relevant, and at those points slow down and begin to read them more critically. You don't have to read everything from cover to cover. Quickly interrogating a text can allow you to distinguish between something that maybe sounds good, sounds relevant because of the title, but when you begin to read it, you realise that it's not as good as you thought it would be, not as good as you hoped it would be. At that point, you just put it to one side and pick up the next one. Further you get through, you should be able to interpret the texts. So you should be able to perhaps take some notes or summarize the key points of that text. Maybe you imagine having you really do have a conversation with some of your mates or some of the people that you're sitting next to in studio, or with your tutor, with your studio tutor, someone on the bus, someone in the library. If you can repeat back what you're taking from a text, then that's a good sign that you're moving into the sort of reflective, critical reading phase. You're able to make interpretations of a text. That will allow you to sort of speed up your work, because you can beginning to build your own framework for understanding, and it can get you to the next stage. Also, as well as looking at the text itself, there are other kinds of information that you can pull from a text that might be relevant for your dissertation topic. So again, the table of contents might take you to something directly. Sometimes you might pull out a book from a library catalogue. It might be that the book itself doesn't help you, but actually the bibliography of the book is super useful. So it provides you with a kind of gateway into the broader research context. You can work with that bibliography to really accelerate the kind of searching that you're doing. Similarly, a lot of texts, a lot of academic texts come with notes or footnotes. Again, for some of you, for some topics, it might be that the dissertation is really generated out of footnotes, or even a single footnote that you find. So just be open to all of the kind of material that texts come back with. As you go through this process, you begin to start hunting down material. So you begin to know more precisely what it is that you're after, and you know more precisely how you can find that stuff. And again, that's reassuring for you. You can see yourself building up material that's kind of answering some of the dissertation questions. And lastly, at some point you've got to move from a kind of active critical reader into a writer. So, we really encourage all of you, as soon as possible in the dissertation process, to start writing. Even if it's just a very short summary of a text that you've read, whether you like it or you dislike it, whether you agree with it or disagree with it, try and test out in your own words what this literature is proposing. So there's more you get into reading and literature reviewing, the more the temptation is just to read one more thing or do one more library search before moving forward. And that kind of builds up the sensation that you can't possibly write anything until you've read another 10 books. Just get it out there. If this is a design project in the studio, you wouldn't try and design the whole thing in your head. Exactly the same for dissertation. Just start sketching really early on. Start writing as soon as you can do, and that will help you to understand where it is that you're at with the literature review specifically, but also helps you understand how literature review is fitting into the broader dissertation. This is rubbish. This is Till's law. It's my old colleague, Jeremy Till. So it's a sort of piss take slide, but with some truth in it. And it sort of shows the cycle of literature reviewing from these early floundering stages in one through the chase into the first proposition. So the more you understand, the more reading you do, the greater your understanding. As soon as you start trying to voice that in your own words, it kind of takes you back to another starting point. It's improved. So it's a kind of iterative improvement from your first literature review, but it might involve you going back to your research question and refining it, kind of starting again within a clearer framework. And so literature reviewing is full of joys and frustrations, and there's no easy way of bypassing that. Again, other things that you might be familiar with that help you when you're taking notes. SQ3R is a well-known technique. If you can apply this to texts that you're looking at, can you survey it? Can you summarize it? Can you say what the question is for that text? Can you read, recall, and review? helps you work out whether you're pulling the right kind of information from the literature that you're looking at. And then just closing out this section, I already mentioned, be systematic from the start. You've got no idea when you're going to come across things that are really crucial to your dissertation, whether you're just reading something that becomes background, or whether you're reading something that you'll quite quickly reject. So assume that it's going to be useful and take good notes from the start. Again, different ways of taking notes for different purposes. You can take notes that sort of summarise the argument that you're looking at. You might take more careful notes that kind of interpret and must engage in a conversation or an imaginary conversation with the author or authors. If you're looking at key texts in your area, you might feel obliged to take really comprehensive notes to demonstrate that you're aware of the moves that are present in a key text. At this stage, if you have any doubt whether something's useful, just write it down. Much easier to keep a note when the stuff's there in front of you, rather than try and re-find that thing in April, just a few days before you're going to submit your dissertation. Again, I mentioned a minute ago, becoming a critical reader improves your own writing. So saying the same thing in reverse. Being a good writer can grow out of good reading. Critical reading leads to critical writing. It becomes easier for you to evaluate the quality of your own written work. And dissertation is mainly a written document, so again, becomes really important. Another thing that you might think of, if you find a book or an article that you really like you appreciate, it might be that you hold on to that as a kind of exemplar that you think would be appropriate for your own work, both in terms of the way that author is explaining something. You might like the way that they phrase certain things. You might appreciate the combination of text and image. So if you're finding good examples or clear examples of writing that seem to fit your dissertation topic, then hold on to it, and you can return to that down the line when it's time to start thinking about how you present your material, how you present your own written work. A little bit more on floundering, and then we'll have a break. Yeah, that's boring. This is straightforward, but boring. You can come back to those. When you're beginning to gather things together, it becomes important to focus on what's in this article, what's in this book or this text that helps your dissertation move forward. What are the key or the central arguments that are being put forward? How can you use them? And so you try and make sure that you comprehend what's being put forward. Again, I mentioned it a minute ago, if you're working with a topic that has specific or technical or philosophical vocabulary attached to it, you can identify that in the early phases of literature reviewing, and you can begin to identify whether there are contested terms in that academic area. So different words for the same thing, whether there's a clear vocabulary that everyone working in an area relies upon. Again, you're also looking at not only the text, but also how the whole argument is being presented. Dissertation as a submission for you, but also dissertation as a analytical and research process can be visually led. So it's a written document, but it can include a significant visual material, and the visuals can be generative of your argument as well as illustrating an argument. So again, some of the peripheral things that you might pick up from literature reviewing are about how other researchers are presenting the whole argument, not just text, but a combination of images, other visual material, and tables or other kinds of data. Yeah, diagrams. Well, time for a break. Time for a break. People need a break. That's almost an hour, so I think it's healthy to have another 5 minutes. Is that all right? Just have a little screen break. What happens after the break, I can't promise it's more exciting, but it's more practical. So I'll be working through some of the same sort of topics, but in a way that you can hopefully apply directly to developing your literature review. So what are we now? 12:16. Quick break, 12:20. Okay. Just switch off. Move away from the screen. Go and do something different. Grab a drink. Back in less than 5 minutes. Okay, I'm good to get going again. I'm conscious that you've got other things to do in your lives. So. Right, let's get the slides back. Okay, no escape from literature review, but hopefully this section and the short final section will be more directly applicable. So I'm just going to go through some sort of tips and tricks, ways that you can begin to get your own literature review started. Rewinding to some of the things that Elaine was talking about, out of a catalogue keyword search, you'll get a kind of avalanche of possible material thrown back at you. Your first job is to really make sense of what it's, how it's useful and how it helps you, what kind of material it is. This was a mini interactive bit, but Elaine's already gone through it. So you need to be able to distinguish between the kind of quality or the purpose of the stuff that comes back from catalogue searches. So this is just the difference between peer-reviewed and trade literature, which Elaine talked about briefly. So on the left, you might get stuff from Journal of Architecture, brain fade, or assemblage. These are, just to expand slightly on what Elaine was saying, these were peer-reviewed articles. Peer reviewing is effectively a kind of quality control mechanism, and it means that anything that's published in a peer-reviewed journal has been through some kind of reviewing process with editors, with experts in the field. It's like giving your essay to a tutor. You have a conversation about it, you get feedback, and you go away and improve it. Exactly the same process for a peer-reviewed journal. So anything you read in here should be of a decent quality. Not always, but that's the idea. On the right-hand side, things like BD, building design, and many others. These are sort of trade magazines, so it's more kind of architectural journalism than academic writing. And this isn't a sort of value judgment that peer-reviewed articles are better than or more useful than trade magazines, for example. More a question of when you get literature back from a catalogue search, allowing you to identify what it is. And so it might be that if you're if you're following through a particular project, it might be that you're writing a dissertation about how something progressed through a planning inquiry and onto site. So you're trying to tell a story, a long and complex story of how something has been developed over time. That's the kind of information that you'd get from the weekly press, probably not information that you find in peer-reviewed journals. Everything has a value. It's up to you to understand really how that fits into your dissertation. Similarly, I mentioned earlier, authors have their own, their own backgrounds, their own agendas, and they might be writing very specifically in support of a particular agenda. So, as part of your literature review work, just take a look at who the author is, what their background is, where they're writing, who they're writing for, and that can help you to understand the frame of the literature that you're looking at. So, as I say, be greedy at the start. Don't discount anything. There could be newspaper articles, blogs, documentaries, as well as more standard academic literature. You've got to shake that down and justify whatever you include, whether it's an apparently strong academic source or whether it's just a very short newspaper article. Depending on what you're doing, that's all useful information. So it's up to you to make a case and to justify why you're including certain things in your dissertation. How do they help you? You might have different kinds of literature present at different points in your dissertation. Right, how to do it. Yeah, I said this before, it's boring. Right, so once you're gathering stuff up, you can begin to make sense of it, what we call an annotated bibliography. So this really is a way of moving out of the catalogue searches, the database searches that Elaine was demonstrating, into an early form of note-taking. It can be very simply organised alphabetically. It might be that you have a number of different kinds of searches going on, so you organise it by topic rather than alphabetically. And it might look like this. So this is a dissertation, this is annotated literature, annotated bibliography. The dissertation, this is from an MArch dissertation about architecture as frame. So the student's beginning to keep some notes about what frame might mean in architecture. So trying to understand the vocabulary, also listing a number of different books and journal articles and dictionary entries that are relevant to that topic. So you can see in bold, it's a list of authors that they're going to look at. They've identified them as potentially relevant, but in this case, they've only read a couple of them. From some, they're just taking definitions. So again, back to the technical vocabulary that might be relevant for your dissertation topic. And for others, in this case, taking quite extensive notes from Unwin's Analysing Architecture, and just beginning to build up kind of specific notes on topics. You can understand how this process will work. Progressively they'll go through the other books that they found, and these notes will grow. And at a certain point, it becomes too unwieldy, too complex, too full as a document to be useful anymore. But in the early stages, it's a really quick way for all of you to get going. You just begin to take notes and see connections between different source material that you're finding. Another way of trying to get your literature together would be to draw diagrams of it. You can begin to visualize what you're finding and its interconnections. It helps you to understand, again, where you're finding larger clusters of material that help your topic, but also helps you identify where there are gaps that you need to be mindful of. So this obviously isn't an architectural, obviously, this isn't necessarily an architectural dissertation, but at the top you can see the kind of search terms about procedural justice in organisation, and this student, or this diagrammatic literature review, is then subdividing that key search into 3 sub areas: so justice effects, justice in organisations, justice perceptions. And under those 3 headings, again, using key terms, beginning to identify and cluster different pieces of literature, and whether these are books or articles, clustering them together under different headings. And you can see the little headings that are beginning to build up with multiple sources. But also, once this is going, you can begin to identify the connections or the cross connections between some of these subheadings and the ones that are there, like voice, which are necessarily dead end, but not necessarily connected to others. So it's a sort of flow diagram. It's, again, a really quick thing for you to do, and a very practical way of beginning to build up your dissertation. And it helps you understand in a bit more detail what you're finding. And this is the same sort of thing in a more sophisticated version. Sort of my PhD student, Alexandra Arenas. So mapping out conceptually how her literature review is coming together. So again, like the last slide, it's starting with, in this case, her research topic, right at the start, and then she's dividing that down into three kind of categories that she'd use to do literature searches and literature reviewing. And you can see she's, I appreciate that maybe on the screen you can't read the detail of this, but when you see the slides from Moodle, you can go back to these and you can read some of the detail. And they set up a very simple set of arrows and a code that allows her to make sort of links forward through the process, but also identify some of the key trajectories of thinking that will take her from some of the background material that she's gathering early in the dissertation literature review, just to set the scene, how that background material is being developed more explicitly into an architectural situation, and how that's being pushed forward in ways that really support the fundamental analysis that she's doing later in the process. So again, you can understand how this kind of very simple diagram can help you sketch out the broad areas that you're searching, and then more importantly, to gather those together and to explain to yourself in the first instance, and then also to your tutor later. It helps you to explain to your reader what the interconnections are between the main, in this case, the main bits of literature, but that can flip over into the main areas of analysis, something that we'll be talking about next week. And again, I'm conscious that you might not be able to read this on the screen, but this is looking at a written literature review. And so I said it's a process that you go through, but also frequently it's a chapter in your dissertation. This is a PhD dissertation by Adam Park, who's one of my students at Sheffield. But again, it's something that you can begin to look back at in weeks or months to come, and think about how you pull together information from different sources. So again, probably doesn't make a great deal of sense to you now, but what we can see in this sample paragraph is how Adam Park is pulling together different bits of literature, books, journal articles in particular, and of course synthesizing the kinds of position or the kinds of argument that are being put forward in the research context where his PhD was situated. So it doesn't have to go through as a list explaining each contribution, much more fluid way of summarizing some of the key thoughts in this literature, but also projecting those forwards and explaining why it's relevant for him to look at this material and how it's helped him to situate his own research and how it's structured the research that follows. Again, other examples that students use to begin to organise literature reviewing. Again, this is from a PhD, so it's slightly more complex, but no reason why you couldn't develop something like this for your own dissertation. So this is sort of zooming out from literature review, which again, I'm mindful that you can't read it on the screen. But this is Kim Trogel, again, the PhD student of mine from Sheffield. So what she's trying to do is list a series of questions or core issues and examples or key references that relate to those core issues, and then projecting forwards into what we'll talk about next week, kind of methods and methodologies, running up lists of examples or case studies, things that she's finding by doing literature reviews, but it's material that she thinks will help her in the later stages, probably the more interesting stages of in this case, the PhD, for you, dissertation. And so storing that material up for a different kind of work. So again, just looking at it in a bit more detail, a different way of diagramming the literature review process, in this case, explicitly linking it back to research questions and then explicitly linking it forward to the kinds of methodologies that might be used to develop the questions or the key concepts from literature. So again, try it. If it works for you, it can be really useful. If you're particularly keen on planning, that kind of diagramming can help you to set out some kind of dissertation plan in terms of a research timetable, a timetable of different kinds of activities. We'd imagine that literature review as a process is something that you go through in the first few weeks of really getting started with your dissertations. It's the sort of thing that doesn't suddenly stop, but it will reduce quite quickly after that initial burst. And you'll still be reviewing literature until the day you submit, but your main focus will shift onto something hopefully more interesting. Yeah, press on. Right, I mentioned this already. Usually you would write your literature review up as a chapter early on in your dissertation, where you can draw attention to the literature that you've reviewed that's been particularly relevant, establishing the kind of overall framework, your approach for the whole dissertation. So I mentioned early on this morning this distinction between you doing a literature review in ways that establishes this overview and this context, and from other things that you'll find in literature review that you push forward into the next phases of work. So if you have a literature review chapter, that usually focuses on the framework, the context, the justification for your dissertation developing in a particular direction, demonstrating that you're familiar with the relevant work that's helped you to make those distinctions. Within a literature review chapter, you might decide to break that down into subsections so it can be organised chronologically. If it makes sense for you to review how a debate has changed over time, then you could set it out chronologically. It might be that for your topic that makes no sense. Much better for you to organise your literature review chapter around themes. Again, your dissertation tutor will help you make these specific decisions. There's not one correct way of doing it. So think about what its role is in your own dissertation, and respond accordingly. Again, for some students, dissertations are a kind of cumulative literature review, in which case it makes no sense to have a single literature review chapter. Much more relevant for you to start each of the chapters in your dissertation with a kind of mini literature review that helps your reader understand the context of the meaning of this particular chapter. So you gather literature together, you kind of open it up, and you then develop it in a chapter, you draw that to a conclusion, and you're on to the next one. So literature reviewing spread fairly evenly through the whole dissertation. Okay, lastly, and very quickly, some tips and tricks. Elaine mentioned reference management software, and I'm going to mention it again. It's entirely optional whether you use this or not. I mean, for some of you, you might have encountered this. For a lot of you, this might be very new. Reference management software is a way of keeping track of stuff that you look at. So it's sort of software that really helps you build up a library of reference material that you can then organise in a whole variety of different ways. What I would say is that if you think your dissertation is going to include a large amount of material, a large amount of literature reviewing, then it's certainly worth your while to look at reference management software. It's a sort of thing that is useful to do early in the dissertation, because it kind of grows with your catalogue searching. There's no point in you deciding in April, I'm really going to benefit from having a reference management library. You can probably survive dissertation perfectly well, just keeping good records, whether that's in a spreadsheet or in a notebook or in a word processing package. But these management systems are designed to do exactly what literature reviews are built for. Elaine mentioned EndNote as one commonly used program. It's supported by both universities. Other reference management software is available. I use a program called Zotero. I know a lot of PhD students use a program called Mendeley. They're kind of the same, so I wouldn't agonize over choosing one. They speak to each other. So I used to use EndNote. We fell out of love. I could just export my EndNote library into Zotero. So you don't panic. It's not a lifelong commitment, but it is something that's worth starting now. You gradually build up entries in your reference management library. It's also a way of, so reference management libraries, they speak to catalogues. So if you were doing a search from the MMU catalogue, you can, with a plugin, you can export full bibliographic information from a library catalogue or from a database search into your own EndNote or Zotero or Mendeley library, and it's there for you to use. And it's also, this is a Zotero interface, but they all look very similar. And so what you're seeing in the middle is a long list of references. And these can be books, journals, articles, they can be films, they can be websites, they can be audio files, whatever you're looking at, whatever stuff you're gathering. And then on the right-hand side, the software has capacity for you to take notes, and so I frequently will use my Zotero library when I'm looking at something to keep notes on a particular book, journal, whatever it is that I'm reading. So it keeps all this material together in one place wherever you need it. You can use it. You can use these sorts of programs on your computers, and you can use them online. And so if you get an account in one of them, you can use it on computers in the library. And if you're typing up your dissertation on a different computer later on, you can just log into your account and pull down all the information that you need. So I mean, it's up to you. As I say, if you think it's something that interests you, it can be really useful, but decide soon and have a quick look around these and other programs if you're interested. Choose one and get going. It's a sort of thing that is easy to do from the start. Elaine and I have both said separately, keep good notes. This is one way of keeping good notes. It keeps bibliographic information automatically, and it allows you to add your own notes separately. So everything's there if you need it. It's not crucial, so you can survive without it. Okay, and then lastly, this is sort of common mistakes in literature reviews. This is from a paper about literature reviews. So things for you to look out for. Literature reviews that aren't obvious why they're relevant for the topic. So the first bullet point that I've highlighted doesn't clearly relate the findings of the literature review to the researcher's own study. Again, something to be mindful of when you're in the process. You should be asking yourself all the time, is this book, journal, website, documentary, is that relevant for my dissertation? If it is, then include it and synthesize it. If it's not, then just push it to one side, and otherwise it'll become a distraction. So everything that you do choose to include, you should know why it's there and what its job is. Again, you don't have to agree with it. It might be that a lot of literature review that you develop is critical of existing work in the area. And that, again, can lead to really good dissertations. If you're taking issue or you're arguing against existing schools of thought, that helps you to develop your own work in a particular direction. And two other bullet points that I've highlighted on here that I think are worth holding on to. A literature review needs to be critical. You need to be thinking about why you've chosen to include this stuff and not other stuff. To say it again in different terms, why does this help you contextualize your dissertation as a study? Again, a whole variety of reasons why you choose to include this material, but you need to explain to yourself why it's useful. And then as you work through the process towards a document for submission, you need to tell your reader why you've chosen to include some things in your literature review. How does this help? How does this literature review help them, the reader, understand what your study was about? And then last bullet point that I've highlighted, criticising literature reviews that don't consider contrary findings or alternative interpretations. Inevitably, the dissertation topics will involve complicated discussions, and we're living in a complicated world. We're studying very complicated topics and programs. So this isn't straightforward. Very rare to find any kind of consensus between landscape architects or urban designers or architects. And it's fine for you to draw attention to those different kinds of opinions. And the literature review is one place where you can rehearse those differences and to say, actually, there is no consensus about my topic. Broadly, the current views are, or historical views are, like this, or this. So it's fine for you to draw attention to where other people have disagreed with each other. And maybe part of your job is to then evaluate which one of these options you think is most appropriate for the way that you want to take the dissertation forward, and might be most appropriate for the way that you want to frame your own work, and so on. So be ready to be critical. A couple of years ago, Fadi Shaya, who was just finished his PhD at University of Manchester, gave a really good summary of literature reviewing to some of my students. So these are some of Fadi's top tips. Saying, actually, don't overdo it. I think this is particularly relevant given the sheer quantity of information that you can find by doing library searches and database searches, overwhelmed with material. So one of your key jobs is to try and identify the things that really do help you to contextualize your dissertation. Choose the main books and really work with them to help you understand and develop your own framework. And then you can supplement that with other material, but try and be focused rather than be completely overwhelmed. Again, one of the tips from Friday, use diagrams to clarify the main topics and the main interconnections. So I've tried to show you a number of different ways that you might begin to develop diagrams that help you approach your own dissertation and your own literature review. There's no guarantee that they'll work, but they're just some starting points. So try them out. If they do work, great. If they don't, then try and invent your own way of visualizing your literature review. And again, that can help you understand how your own literature review is operating, where gaps might be, might help you understand how you have to explain it to your readers. But also some of that diagramming can help you understand how your own analysis will develop in the subsequent phases. I keep saying, the more interesting phases of your dissertation. So the kind of diagrams that you can generate, understanding your literature review, can be moved with a bit of care into the analytical section of the dissertation. I've just included these. I wasn't sure if Elaine would do, but I'll leave them in the slides as they go onto Moodle. And there's some fantastic online resources, either online study skills and workshops at both universities. So do take some time to look at the library web pages, not simply for the catalogue, but also for these kinds of study skills support. So lots of stuff on finding literature, resources from the University of Manchester. This is called the Academic Phrase Bank. Again, really built for people going through dissertations, helping to undertake a literature review and develop that into later phases of the work. Methods at Manchester, we'll talk about this a bit more next week, but it's there as a really useful resource. Again, a kind of question came up at the end of Elaine's session. When you can search one library catalogue or database, you can transfer those kind of techniques to others. And the focus today was an MMU library, but you'll find very similar kinds of resources at the University of Manchester library website. Again, some really useful study skills and catalogue searches and databases and so on. RBA library, that came up in the database demonstration earlier on. This I'll just leave in the slides. If by some work of fate you're interested, this is a bibliography of material that could help you develop a literature review. Again, it's like a literature review of literature reviews, so use with caution, but some specific to architecture and then some more general about different kinds of research. Advert for next week. It's me again, you lucky people. I'll be trying to develop some of the framework discussion from today, but project that forwards by looking at methodologies and methods. So more how you set up the how to do your study, how to develop your research as it goes forwards into the dissertation. And one of the questions that came up in the chat was to do with the dissertation groups. So Leandro will be putting some more information on Moodle. I'll just outline the process for a couple of minutes so that you're becoming aware of what that will involve. So on the 26th of October, there's in this slot on a Tuesday morning for the MArch students only, not for MLA or architecture and urbanism students, but for MArch students, Leandro will be presenting. It's called dissertation hustings. So we'll explain in a bit more detail what the process will be. Effectively for MRH students, we organise probably 25 different dissertation tutor groups. So these will vary in size from about 5 students to about 10 or 12. Each tutor proposes a dissertation topic. So that could be a topic around a particular issue. It could be around a methodological approach. It can be around a particular theme or a set of readings. And those will all be made available on Moodle. You can look through those, understand which tutors will be running a dissertation group this year. You can understand the theme that their group or their groups will operate around. Leandra will explain this in more detail, but there'll be a lot of information on Moodle. On the 26th of October, there'll be, like you voted for ateliers and just the way that you voted for research methods workshops, there'll be a process that you go through where you rank in order of your preference the dissertation tutor groups that you're most interested in joining. And in the same sort of process that you've been through for ateliers and for research methods, we will try and line you up as closely as possible with your chosen tutor and topic. So at this stage, it's not too early for you to start thinking about what it is you want to do for your dissertation, because you've been thinking about it already for a couple of weeks or perhaps even longer. But there's a way of aligning your own broad or specific interests with the expertise and the kind of framework that dissertation tutors will be offering this year. Yeah, stop sharing my screen. Does anybody have any questions, either about dissertation tutors and groups, or about much more exciting literature reviewing and contextualization of your research for the dissertation? As I say, I understand it's very difficult, meeting what's a very generic lecture that tries to address what literature reviewing might be for all of you, with your very specific interest in a dissertation topic or a research topic. But if you've got any questions, either about the specifics or about the principles of literature reviewing, either shout out or stick them in the chat. Maybe if you're feeling sociable, you could stick your cameras on as well, just in these last few minutes. I've been looking at a blank screen for 3 hours. I have no idea who you are or where you are. When can you see this on Moodle? I've been recording it all the way through with captions, so sometimes it takes Zoom a couple of hours usually to process that, but as soon as it's ready, I'll post it on Moodle. I can post the slides as soon as we finished. As I said, the slides deliberately contain too much information, and some of the slides are probably too detailed for you to see on screen, but they will be a useful resource once you get going with your own dissertation. So revisit them, and then they'll be there in the next few minutes. Well, I'm going to have some lunch in a minute, so they'll be there by the end of the day for sure. Slides, yes, I'll put the slides on as well as the Zoom recording, and usually Elaine and I both add in a few links to some of the resources that we didn't get time to demonstrate. 25 groups will have different topics, yes. The way it works is, you're asked to join a group, or you vote for groups, and we never make a promise that we'll get you into your first choice. We'll try and get you as close as possible. And the idea is that each group starts with an issue. It'll start with a set of readings, like an umbrella. So, in a similar way to the way that your atelier will be organised or your research methods group will be organised around a kind of theme. The idea is that, similarly for dissertations, in a relatively small group, you'll start with some fairly focused discussion, and then out of that, your dissertation will be situated. So the theme, the intention is that in these relatively small groups, people are working, groups of students are working on similar kinds of topics, so they can share information. So as a small group, you can have a meaningful conversation about, okay, what are you doing for your dissertation? I found this thing, it's not that useful for me, but I think you'll find it really important. Or you can share methodologies and methods. So there is some sort of exchange between you, but we recognise that dissertations are an individual piece of work, but that's why we're putting you in these small groups. They're so individual, it can become quite a lonely piece of work. So we're just trying to get you together in a group that gives you a bit of mutual support and exchange. So your dissertation will go off however you want to steer it, but the idea is that you're linked up with a tutor who has the right kinds of skills to support that. You're linked into a broad framework that will help you develop your own work as it goes forward. And it's also, I should say, it's also a kind of filter. And then when we try and support dissertation topics that are as wide as architecture or practice, humanities, history, geography, culture. But there are some, every year inevitably, there are some topics, some early proposals that as staff, we simply don't have the expertise to support. So by putting up 25-ish groups, it will give you an indication of what we can supervise, but also by implication, what we can't. Okay. There's nothing else coming in the chat, so I presume that means you've either all gone already, or it's as clear as mud. If you've got any questions, I'd be delighted to talk to you. So send me an email. What I would say is that I live at the University of Manchester, not at MMU. So my email's on the first slide, and it's s.j.walker@manchester.ac.uk, not at mmu.ac.uk. So if you're trying to email me at Manchester, not at MMU. We'll just go into the ether somewhere. How's dissertation organised usually? The first phase for you will be to go through the dissertation hustings, the election for your dissertation group. That will be on the 26th of October. We'll get you some preliminary information. Leah will talk through the process in more detail. As soon as you've voted, Leah and I will sit down in a dark room with some strong coffee and put everyone into groups. And then the first time you meet with your dissertation tutor will be mid-November, 17th of November. So this is just for MArch students. I think it's the 16th of November, beg your pardon. So it'll be the middle Tuesday in November. It's on your timetable already. So by mid-November, you'll be in a group, you'll know what your kind of umbrella topic is, you'll know who your tutor is, and from that point, there'll still be a couple of these exciting lectures for you to attend but your main focus will be on your own work in the context of the framework for your tutor group. And from that point, really, you're working much more closely with the dissertation tutor, right through till submission early in May. That, in a nutshell, is the organisation of it. I'm watching the chat. No more questions. Time's up. You should go and have some lunch or do something different. Get ready for research methods if you've got that this afternoon. Right, thank you for being patient and sticking with us. I know it's a pretty boring grind to do it in an abstract way. Hopefully it'll make much more sense once you start actually getting your teeth into your own topic, where this becomes much more interesting. But for all of you, in some ways, you will have to do literature reviews. So hopefully some of this will kind of stay with you. Right, I'll see you next week. Any questions, just give me a shout.